Dr. Beaudry, thank you so much for your time and opportunity to interview as a Hort legend with the American Society for Hort Science. We'll go ahead and start with the first question. What is your horticultural specialization, and what are the primary positions you have held?
Yeah, so my specialization is post-harvest biology and technology, and I would say it's probably pretty evenly weighed between those two, the biological aspect as well as the technological aspect. I started my job at Michigan State University 3 days after I graduated with my PhD. So that's it. So I made one move, and that was, the rest of it's been all my career has always been at Michigan State University. Yeah, I started out in Ohio, went to University of Toledo, Ohio State, finished up a horticulture degree, University of Georgia for a master's and PhD, and then directly to Michigan State, and that's where my professional career would have begun. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. What has horticulture meant to your life and career?
So that's a complicated question, and I thought about that particular question a little bit. So what has it meant to my life and to my career? And I have to say that my consideration of horticulture has changed over the years. So when I think about it as a graduate student, I thought about it as questions that were interesting, and I thought about them in a little bit of a vacuum, I guess I would say. The longer I work in horticulture, the more it connects with me at a more fundamental level, or maybe a level that is kind of associated with my personal ethics for, the benefit of mankind, the benefit of the planet. So it's gone actually in a way that I think is really positive. So I started out wanting to solve problems, answer questions, be clever, that kind of thing. And anymore, I still want to do those things, but I want to do it in a way that benefits society. Because if you think about horticulture, horticulture does a number of different things. It provides us with foods that are interesting. We can eat all the grain crops in the world, right, and keep ourselves sustained. We can eat beans, we can eat corn, we can eat rice. But for us to truly live as humans, and for our societies to prosper and cultures to I say change over times or adapt or become what they could be, they need diversity, and diversity in our diet, diversity in our foods, diversity in our landscapes, those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things that make humans human. In the very first days when mankind just had to sort of go out there, pick up what he could in the environment, and he spent most of his time just trying to find food. Nowadays, we can grow food. We have lots of leisure time, relatively speaking. We can become scientists and lawyers and whatnot. It's because the farmers do what they do. And so we're able to also take that time to make better foods, good foods, healthier foods, grow another population of people who also respect and appreciate those foods. And so, and I'm focusing on foods because that's been my career, but I would say the same thing for the ornamental half of things too. So our environment, whether it be in the house with our plants or flowers that we might bring home, or our yards, that sort of thing, our environment in our cities and towns. Yeah, all of those are the kinds of enriching experiences that horticulture brings to us. And so, like I say, I connect with it at a different level than I used to. Yeah.
It's a great response. Thank you for that. So, what do you consider to be the most rewarding part of your career in horticulture?
Well, that's kind of interesting question as well, because I've I've always been completely rewarded by my activities. I've loved what I've done since the very first days in graduate school, working at the University of Georgia, to my current day now. So at the time, I was working in physical systems, looking at release kinetics of gas molecules in this case, doing some biochemistry at the time. And then I've continued to sort of evolve my career, that it's involved other things, or involved other things. So now I'm using solar power to produce refrigeration in smallholder communities in India. I'm also doing some molecular biology and protein chemistries. And, all I'm trying to say is that, there's no end, there's no limit. And the appreciation that I feel today is just as genuine as it was in the very first days when I began. So it's hard to say, like, the most rewarding part of my career. If I had to look at it kind of in retrospect, like as a retiree, which I am not just yet. So if I had to look at it in retrospect, it would be the opportunity to grow it in a number of different ways. It's always been rewarding, but to be able to grow it in a number of different ways. And more recently, like with my work in the international sphere, to be able to like develop things that might have meaning for folks that don't have the access to the kinds of pleasures in life that I do, the free time, et cetera. because they're out there working for a living and trying to just feed their families, whereas I have loads of leisure time, relatively speaking, so I can spend all that time in the laboratory, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's kind of been what I think of as being very, very valuable. Continue to attack problems, issues, make impacts either in the local industry or in the lives of people, sort of writ large.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been a member of ASHS, and how has the society influenced your career?
So I've been a member of ASHS since I was in graduate school. My very first year in graduate school, my major professor said, "You're coming with me to a meeting." I didn't understand, excuse me, I didn't understand what ASHS was at the time, but my very first meeting was in McAllen, Texas, and somebody somewhere will be able to go back in time and figure out when that was, but it's likely 37, 38 years ago, something like that. But I've been a member since then, continuously. And the society has influenced my activities in a number of different ways. So it's created a professional network, and it's created a resource for me to find new graduate students or new postdocs or somebody that might be working in my lab or working parallel to me, so we can talk about things that might be difficult for me and easy for them, if you know what I mean. So the society, I think, is really important, and I make sure that my students come to society events because we have a special situation here, if you think about it. A professional society, a society that helps you develop in your career. There are lots of other meetings that are held out there that might be held by, let's say, private companies, right? And the meeting is its own end. And that is not true of ASHS. ASHS is dedicated to career development and, and the development of the science. Whereas a single meeting, whatever it might be on, whatever the topic could be on, it could be on genomics of, let's say, cuticle formation, to think about a recent topic I was talking about. But that's put on by an organization that's not affiliated with your academic development. Then at the end of that meeting, that's the end of things, and you come out with the proceedings, and you're done. Whereas here, we have people who have been involved their whole career, and we actually have legacies where people and then their graduate students are involved, and then their graduate students are involved for now dozens and dozens of years. And so I think that the idea of ASHS is a pure idea and a good idea and something that should be sustained. And that's why I support it in the way that I do.
Well, thank you.
Mm.
That's a perfect segue into our next question is what advice can you offer to students or young professionals in horticulture?
Well, gosh, that's a complicated question as well. So I think about people that are entering into my program, for instance. The first thing is to work hard. There's no substitute for putting in the hours, So if you're not passionate about it, you're going to be less inclined to work hard, I suppose. But that is my first advice. And don't be particular about the subject matter. Honestly, there are great problems, great questions, paradoxes to be solved in every field. So whether you're going into post-harvest like I have, or production areas, or whether you're going to be a specialist in some particular area of plant physiology, don't worry about it. Your career will make it rewarding on its own. So just head into it. Don't think about it twice. Just get going, get engaged. And then the other thing is to be sure if you go to like professional societies to be involved. So don't just go to the sessions, let's say, but do what you can to begin to integrate within the community of people who share or work with your area of expertise or something that supports your area of expertise. So working in isolation is not really an option anymore. Yeah. So this allows you ASHS meetings provide a perfect opportunity for that. But beyond ASHS, I would suggest the same thing. So whether it's in your department, within your college, across colleges, networks that span the globe, and there's no reason not to have a network that's global anymore. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Nice. Thank you.
Mm.
Last question. What excites you most about the future of the horticultural industry and profession?
Gosh, as a faculty member, we're often inclined to be relatively negative about the future. I hate to say that, but it's partly true, and part of that has to do with nature of support for horticulture at the academic level, and so that's changing over time. But when I think about the kinds of things that we can do now, especially at the molecular end of things. If we're able to separate ourselves mentally, just say, I'm not a molecular biologist, I'm a horticulturist, and I'm using molecular tools, we can address those questions without trying to put a label that separates us from the things that we need, which are those foods that I was talking about earlier. So I would love it for society to be a little more integrated, or academic society to be a little bit more integrative in terms of the kinds of things that they think are important. And so if you're a molecular biologist, don't consider yourself a molecular biologist, consider yourself a horticulturist with molecular skills, or a molecular biologist that loves to work in horticultural commodities, if you know what I mean. So some of those kinds of things, and the same thing could be true for somebody that works at the physics or physical level or works at the mathematical levels. So I'd love to see that kind of integration, and we're seeing it more and more. The potential is there more and more, especially with the way the globe is now so intertwined. And that gives me great hope for the future. So, and I think about my past, growing up as a carpenter's son many, many years ago, right? I didn't think about what goes on inside of a plant. I think about it now, right? And my career has shifted and it's gone from very physical sort of nature that I was working on with release kinetics, so kind of the physics basis of things. Now I'm working into the molecular field a little bit more than I used to in the past, and kind of answering questions. I mean, honest to gosh, identify a gene, take out the protein, test what that darn thing does, and then answer those kinds of questions in a very clear fashion. That kind of trajectory is only possible if people are willing to work across disciplinary lines. And fortunately, at my institution, I'm very happy to say that those barriers are really low. So, but that gives me a lot of hope for the future. I worry that we're going to take our eye off the ball and not focus on horticulture. But for those people that do, in those situations where we can, that gives me great hope.
Well, thank you. Dr. Beaudry, thank you for your time and for your insight with ASHS HortLegends.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.